Hey everyone, welcome to Finding Order in Chaos, seamlessly managing K-12 classroom devices. My name is Evan Stein. I'm the founder and managing partner of FSA Consulting, a Pittsburgh-based managed service provider, which is just a fancy way of saying that we're IT consultants. Whether we're your entire IT department, handling everything from password resets to device deployment and management, to cybersecurity, virus protection and backups, or you have your own boots on the ground IT team and just need some high level support to help with the heavy lifting, we are here to help you do what you do. Our team of technicians, engineers, and administrators have experience with top solutions providers like Microsoft, Google, Cisco, Okta, VMware, Ubiquiti, Aruba, Ruckus, and on and on and on. And we're part of the exclusive Apple Consultants Network. So not only are we experts on everything Apple, but even Apple acknowledged our expertise. So with that said, we're here today to talk about one of the tools we use to support the folks in the K-12 arena. The idea for today's webinar was spawned about a year ago when the COVID-19 pandemic was really shifting into high gear. The country had shut down, schools were sending kids home, and one of our now K-12 clients got a major grant to buy 350 new iPads. Literally a pallet of devices arrived on the loading dock of the school. The principal called the teachers down to collect their new devices and chaos ensued. Teachers took their iPads back to their classrooms and were unboxing these new devices, starting them up, trying to connect to whatever Wi-Fi network they could get to work, entering their own personal Apple IDs into every device, manually downloading apps from the Apple App Store onto entire classroom sets of iPads. It was a mess. If this sounds like something that could happen or did happen at your school, don't worry, you aren't alone. We were brought in and designed a comprehensive IT strategy to deal with not only these 350 new devices, but all of the existing desktops and laptops, institution-owned and personal devices, from Wi-Fi network design to identity and single sign-on integration for all users, teachers and students, across all of their computer systems. And Jamf School was one of the solutions we implemented to help teachers and parents manage their students' devices, both in the classroom and at home. Jamf School was really the unsung hero of that particular example. But there's so much great stuff happening on the Jamf platform that anyone who isn't using Jamf to manage their Apple devices just simply doesn't know what they're missing. And so today, we'll learn a bit more about Jamf capabilities for educators. We're going to get started in just a minute, but before we do, as if we all don't know how Zoom works yet, I'd be remiss if I didn't say we've muted everyone's mics. If you have any questions along the way, you can put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. When the presentation's over, we'll have a short Q&A session, so let us know what questions you have and what we've missed. Also, this webinar is being recorded, so if you have a chance to go back and watch the video presentation again later, or share it with a colleague or supervisor. So without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Lee Krause from Jamf. Lee is the Senior Channel Sales Engineer and has been with Jamf for over 7 years. He's worked with education, enterprise, and commercial customers, and has expertise in Apple device management and the entire Apple ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Krause.
Yeah, thank you very much, Evan, and great to hear that story and hear how we're going to be able to hopefully bring order to that chaos, that's for sure. So we're going to be covering Jamf School, and we're going to be talking about how it can help not only run the classroom, but do a lot of things. And really, you kind of highlighted it. The COVID pandemic really thrust a lot of these schools into the 21st century, and it really kind of shook them up because they really didn't have a remote learning strategy. So that's one of the things that Jamf School can do. So ultimately, we like to talk about how people talk about us. So one of the great things is great support, not a supplier or a real partner. The affordable Swiss Army knife for MDM, simple and reliable. That's really what Jamf School is made for. The simplicity of being able to get devices enrolled, get the content, get the apps, and also have the communication between the student, teacher, and also the parent. And we'll walk through each one of those pieces. So ultimately, Jamf School is built for education. And what we're talking about there is we have Jamf School Management System. So we talked a little bit at the beginning here about the Jamf School Teacher app, we talk about the Jamf Parent app, we talk about the Jamf School Student app. All of those apps are on those devices and can be accessed as simply and easily as just a tap away from each device. But each one of them plays a critical role in how Jamf School works. We're going to actually walk through each one of these, but we're also going to do it in a high level enough area so we're not to burden you with a lot of information. Hopefully this information spurs thoughts of, hey, I'm not doing this right, or let's do it a better way. So let's actually start to take a look here. So when we start talking about Jamf School, we're looking at the ability for device and user management for iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and tvOS. And really what that allows us to do is have a dashboard. Well, also facilitate classroom management. There's two ways to do classroom management. One of those ways is with Apple School Manager, which is an offering by Apple, where we can actually do a lot of our facilitation of classes, rosters, all those types of things, and bring that information into Jamf School. If not, we can do all of that in Jamf School. So either way, if we're using Apple School Manager or if we're not, we can utilize Jamf School to do classroom management. We can also have multiple locations. So realize that maybe you're just a small school, but there may be districts out there. There may be a lot of different locations with high schools, middle schools, after school programs, whatever it might be. Then we also have that anonymous sync to Apple School Manager. So if we're already utilizing some of these tools, it brings that information into Jamf School, but does it in a very logical way. So ultimately, when we're looking at Jamf School, here's a dashboard of what it looks like. We've got a lot of information of just what we're looking at for what kind of apps are being deployed to the devices. What iOS versions do we have out there? Popular device models. So we're not going to really get too much into the tech. Really what we're here is just to kind of show you what it looks like. Here are some of the locations that can be seen from Jamf School. So you can see that I have a high school, I have an elementary school, I have a middle school, and another elementary school. The other nice part about that is if I have maybe administrators at each of those schools, I can give them rights within Jamf School to do what they need to do for their grade levels. That means I can also deploy things like Wi-Fi profiles that might be different from my high school to my Oak Grove Middle School. So it gives me the power to be able to do things where I'm automating a lot of these tasks rather than having to consistently do them manually, kind of as Evan had talked about in the very beginning. The other thing that we can do is push down these profiles to these devices very simply and easily. So ultimately, if we're looking to go ahead and do classroom management, we can add users and classes to Jamf School. Step two, we can upload those users. If we're using Apple School Manager, we don't have to. It's a step in the process. But if we are using that, then all of that information comes into Jamf School and really makes this a really seamless process when we're going ahead and doing this. Then what happens is we can start to pull in all of the classroom and persona information in persons. So the cool part is when we first start those devices up, we can have Johnny go ahead and authenticate with that device, because if we've pulled on his information from Apple School Manager, we already know who his ID is. Now he gets tied to a device. Now we know where Johnny's going to school. We know what classes he's taking. We now know what apps he needs. Now we also need, if there's restrictions that need to be on his devices, all of those things can be set up through Jamf School. So ultimately what that does is now it starts to facilitate the actual apps that are deployed down to the devices for Jamf School. And the first one is Jamf Teacher. So Jamf Teacher allows us to be able to manage their class and keep students focused. They can also go ahead and deploy new URLs or apps for a student who maybe needs some remediation within that room or in that classroom. They can do a lot of different things. They can also request apps from Jamf School. So an administrator or the IT administrator can go ahead and approve those apps for a teacher. So if they need to kind of change things on the fly, it's a great way for us to do that. But the nice part is that they're native app and web deployments directly down to the students. They prepare classes and lessons in advance, and we can also do that ad hoc. We can message students. The great thing about the messaging is that it is something that can be kept. So if there's communication between a student and a teacher, that information can also be stored on the web with Jamf School. The great thing though is that the student has the ability to message a teacher no matter where they are. They could be on vacation, still catching up on homework. They could be in their virtual classroom. Most of the time, students don't want to reach out and ask questions in class. Now they have a pure relationship with the teacher where they can ask questions and they can get the direction that they need. The other thing is we can also restrict websites, apps, domains, and functionality. The other nice is if we can do those ad hoc classrooms and capabilities. The other nice thing is that we can also prepare those lessons in advance. We can manage devices with lessons on the fly. We can create lessons and use templates. We have full device utilization with multiple apps, and then app deployment directly to student devices. So again, if a teacher feels that a student is making the progress, they might be able to do a remedial. Maybe they're having trouble with their nouns or whatever it might be. They can actually help them by deploying a new app directly to that student's device, or they could give them a suggested website that maybe will help them with phonics, whatever that might be. So it's a very cool way to allow the teacher to have the control, but they can also restrict things. And that's one of the other nice things is we can have that control in the classroom. We have the ability, oops, that one kind of built out kind of quick. I apologize. I'm gonna just do a little quick back there. And we're going to say control, but we can go ahead and pre-populate classes with Apple School Manager if needed. But if not, we can build that out with Apple School Manager or with Jamf School. We can create groups of students within a given class, and we can control how long those lessons are applied. Then we can also manage those restrictions. Jamf School also allows us to say, can a teacher remove those restrictions? So if they need to go someplace or have access to maybe a social media site, those restrictions can also be done from the teacher also on those devices. Then again, we do have the messaging that now allows the student to go ahead and message their teacher, get help, find out if maybe they were gone for a week. Maybe they got into a bike accident and they just want to make sure that they're doing everything that they need to and where they should start because they have missed a week of school. All of those things can be messaged to the student and to the teacher. And again, one of the questions we usually get is this information accessible? It can be by the administrator. All they need to do is notify, and those logs of any of those chats can be provided to the administrator of Jamf School. But again, we can also deploy apps directly to the students and set and clear restrictions on those student devices. So a lot of real power there to be able to facilitate the learning that's needed between the teacher and the student. So here's a little bit of a kind of comparison about Jamf School Teacher and Apple Classroom. If you're not familiar, Apple Classroom is Apple's offering that allows us to kind of do some of that facilitated learning. It is available on the iOS devices, but you'll notice on the right-hand side, it does require Bluetooth. It does allow us to do single app lock. It's not able to apply restrictions. It does lock in Safari, but one of the big things with Apple Classroom is it requires us to all be in the same room. That's where really Jamf School Teacher and the Jamf School ecosystem really allows us for that distributed learning model, because we can deploy Zoom, we can deploy WebEx, whatever you might be using in your organization. You might be using D2L. It really just kind of depends on what you're using. Those apps can be deployed. We can apply restrictions. We can take those whitelisted websites and put those into the ability for the student to access those and prepare those lessons. We can do ad hoc classrooms, and then we can do a simple app request workflow for the teachers. So a lot of really, really good things there. Just kind of wait to take a quick pause. Do we have any questions that have come through yet, or are we doing pretty good?
Looking good so far. Nothing in the
All right,
nothing in the chat.
All right, awesome. We'll keep moving forward then. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the parent into this conversation. Jamf Parent is something that can be distributed to a parent. Now, one of the things is that when we first, brought Jamf School, Jamf Parent was only for iOS devices. We've now recently also introduced this for Android devices. But now what we can do is say, parents can be involved in this. So let's use Johnny as that example. Is now it allows the parent to reside on their device, whether it be an iOS or an Android device, or even an Apple Watch. That's a great way. But now they can manage restrictions on browsers and apps. They can manage those genres of social media. So let's say Johnny should be studying from 2 p.m. to 3:30 when he gets home from school, when we're all able to get back into the classroom. That is the time when the parent could turn off those other restrictions. We could turn off the social media or any messaging. We could restrict motion, day and time. If a student is riding on the bus or if they're riding their bike to school, those are all things that we can know about when we're kind of looking at those sorts of things. But the nice part about that is the Jamf admin can configure that parent access. It's very, very simple. They actually facilitate that from the student device. So it's a trusted device to Jamf School, and it's a trusted device that gets access to that because they have to be the parent. So it's a really nice way that we can kind of control that also. The other thing is that it does give them the ability to limit applications, whether it be the actual applications or just restricting access to Safari. The other nice part is that we can also get a location. We can know if their device is in motion so that it shouldn't receive any activity, or if it might be that they're driving. We have students that drive. So we can set those motion things so they don't receive any alerts on that device. So a lot of really, really neat things there to be able to go ahead and do. And then within Jamf School, there is the ability to see the device's location. This is something that can be toggled on or off depending on your district's take on that, but it does give us the ability to go ahead and pinpoint that device, which obviously would be with a student. But also that helps with facilitating if those devices are staying with students over the summer to ensure that Johnny hasn't lost his device, didn't leave it up at the cabin, those types of things. So it does allow us to locate that device. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the student piece. This is where the facilitated and really the differentiated learning starts to happen. Ultimately, what we're able to go ahead and do is really focus the student on what they need to do. What are the things that I should be doing at that time? Is it my lesson plans, my updates, whatever that might be? So this is kind of what the self-service looks like on a device that it has the student app. So they may have their math. That would switch if they're moving from math to English. So it has time-based profiles so that if they're moving different classes, it'll actually know which one they should be in. That's also where the teacher can also focus that students. If they're not in the English lesson and they're in math, the teacher can actually go ahead and restrict those apps to make sure that they're doing the lesson that they should be doing. So it really empowers those students with controlled technology, allows them to set up their own device. They are able to send those messages to their teachers, install pre-approved apps, iBooks, and documents, and then also update apps, iOS, and more from that. The other nice thing is that we do have the ability, if you would want to do any kind of a trial, we do have that available for Jamf School. So you can actually take that for kind of a free trial. So you can go ahead and get that ready to go. So that is the link. We could also provide that after the fact. But that's kind of the nutshell of Jamf School. We really wanted this to be a high level experience. So hopefully you were able to get what you needed out of that. So one of the things I like to say is thank you very much for joining us during this. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A at this time.
Does anybody have any questions? Lee, that was really a fabulous overview. I think you really illustrated the tangible benefits of Jamf School without overwhelming our friends with the gory details of how the technology works behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm a technical guy, so that's always hard for me to do.
Yeah, there's a lot going on behind the scenes there. And this was just, the features and not sort of how it works. It's really a complicated platform, but Jamf makes it super easy for teachers to use in real time. And I really think that's the takeaway, right? IT people can, take a device away and work on it in an office somewhere and bring it back. But the ability for teachers to administer whole classrooms of devices is really one of the great things about Jamf School. We had
Absolutely.
we had a comment come in. Laura says that she had no idea that iPads were capable of being controlled on such a high level, so that everyone in the classroom is on the same page. Laura, thank you for saying that. That's when you're using Jamf School, the device in your hand really becomes just a musician, one musician in an orchestra of devices in the classroom. Truly, the classroom works in concert. So thanks for thank you for that comment. Mike is asking, could you please talk about how easy it is for teachers to have students use Google Drive, Google Docs, and slides?
Absolutely. So the nice part about that is that's just within the Google ecosystem. So a lot of that is just the apps or URLs where they're accessing. So those can be deployed right to the devices through Jamf School. So very, very easy to do. And they're able to go ahead and access what they need to. And then we can restrict anything that doesn't need to be. But very, very easy to set that up with whatever ecosystem you're working with, whether it be Microsoft, Google, or other education tools. That's not a problem at all to be able to set that up. And if there's any follow-up, please let us know.
I have a question. Choosing to use Apple devices in the classroom is one thing, but what about parents who don't have an iPhone? Can they still control their students' devices?
Yes, and that was hopefully, I hadn't updated my slide deck, but we do now provide the Jamf Parent app for Android devices. So yes, that is one of the things that we recognized is not everybody has an iPhone, not everybody has an Apple Watch. So you are able to go ahead and do that and facilitate that from an Android device now.
Excellent. I have one more that came in just now. We talked about this early on, but if you missed the beginning part of the chat, we were talking about scoping or assigning which apps go to which devices. The question is, can each teacher or each class have their own apps, or do all of the devices in the system have to have the same apps?
No, that's a beautiful part about Jamf School is you can have varied apps and those apps can change for what that student is going into, or you can have them all be the same. But we know that if you're in a district between the high school level and a K-2, those apps are all going to vary. So the best part is that we can scope those devices to those groups based on that with Jamf School, knowing that roster information of what grade they're in, what classes they're taking. You might have an 8th grade student who's doing high school level student work. So to be able to know those kinds of things and be able to adapt to that, that's the power of Jamf School, is to be able to do those sorts of things so that whatever apps are needed, and that's different between every class, could be even different between schools, because we all know that different schools might have learning for different students. We might have a learning and development type arena in our district. So all of that things get stratified through Jamf School and can easily be handled.
Awesome. Awesome. Lee, this was wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to show us around Jamf School, and to all of our guests for making time at the end of a long day, so close to Memorial Day holiday. Please let us know if you think of any more questions, or if you'd like to chat further about any of the Jamf mobile device solutions. Don't forget to share the link to this presentation with anyone you think may be influential in helping you deploy Jamf School at your institution. Have a safe and enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who serves in uniform, and especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great evening, everybody.
Yep, thank you very much. And thank you, Evan. Take care.
Thank you, guys.